Hello everyone, welcome back to Futurists, your one-stop shop for science, history, politics, and all things related to the world of tomorrow.
Today we're going to be analyzing the recent midterm primaries for the Republican Party and discussing the party's future.
So first off, we had the Georgia primaries before the midterms. If you want to start off by that.
Yeah, so in Georgia we had multiple competitive primaries on the Republican side, including the gubernatorial or governor primary, which incumbent Brian Kemp defeated Trump-endorsed challenger David Perdue, as well as the Attorney General primary, which Trump's endorsed candidate also lost, and also the Secretary of State primary. It's especially important because Georgia's Secretary of State controls election laws, and Trump's endorsed candidate lost even there to very controversial incumbent Brad Raffensperger.
Yeah, some interesting stats about those elections were Brian Kemp winning by more than 50%, and Brad Raffensperger winning 52 to 34%. And it's important to note that Georgia does have open primaries, so crossover votes from the Democratic Party could have helped these candidates. But like a landslide victory by Brian Kemp, who Mike Pence campaigned for, it does kind of tell that maybe the election fraud stuff that former President Trump is talking about is not the most important to the voters.
Yeah, and Brian Kemp was generally expected to win. Like, most polls showed him winning. But Brad Raffensperger was generally expected to lose, as he's very unpopular with a lot of the Republican Party. A lot of people actually blamed him for Trump losing in Georgia in 2020. But he was able to win by a substantial amount and even avoided a runoff, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, in the other Georgia primary for Senate, Herschel Walker won pretty easily. It was expected, so nothing special there. And also, another notable fact is obviously Mike Pence campaigning for Brian Kemp, which shows a split between the former president and the vice president. He did have a pretty good relationship when they were in office, but now, since January 6th, they've kind of split.
Yeah, Pence is clearly trying to distance himself from Trump for one reason or another, and it's possible that this is because Pence plans to run against Trump in 2024.
Yeah, and let's talk about Nebraska now. That was also an interesting primary. Charles Herbster, who was the Trump-endorsed candidate, lost to the governor-endorsed Jim Pillen.
Yeah, so Charles Herbster is a very hard right, really candidate. I think he ran one of the agricultural committees in Nebraska, and but his loss was largely to sexual assault allegations against him. So I don't know if we can take as much from this primary as we can from Georgia.
Yeah, the outside factors didn't really help, so it's hard to evaluate Trump's influence based on that primary alone. The other important primaries, one was the Ohio Senate race, where J.D. Vance was polling third place until Trump endorsed him. And then he started polling better back to first place, and he won 31% of the vote. The other candidates split the vote, 24%, 22%. So the author of the Hillbilly Elegy and the venture capitalist J.D. Vance won that election.
One thing we can clearly take from this is that Trump's influence largely depends on the state. Like, he clearly had a lot of influence in Ohio, which makes sense because it's a state that he won by a lot in both 2016 and in 2020. And he remains very popular, especially with these working class white voters.
Yeah.
Much more influence there than in Georgia or in Nebraska.
Yeah, the interesting fact about Ohio is that former President Obama actually won that. I don't know if he won it in 2012. I'm pretty sure he did, but I'm definitely sure he won it in 2008. And this state has swinged a lot, mainly because of Donald Trump. Like, he outperforms polls by a lot in this state. Like, I remember for the 2020 election, it was pretty close to the polls, 0.5%, 1% difference. But then in the actual election, it was a blowout for a swing state standard, a 9% win.
It's very true. And yeah, I'm pretty sure Obama did actually win in 2012. I think that Ohio was the state that gave him enough electoral votes. And just 4 years later, it's extremely pro-Trump.
Yeah, those Midwestern states definitely are interesting to watch. two like maybe less important primaries that still had some like national importance were MTJ, Majority Taylor Greene, winning in Georgia despite like a lot of media coverage of her primary, but it's expected because it's a really hard right like district. And Madison Cawthorn lost his election by like a small amount, but that was mostly due to the outside factors and like investigative journalism by like some media around him of like his personal life. So
Yeah, Cawthorn had a ton of scandals, and he only lost by a small amount. So
yeah, another interesting race that happened recently was in West Virginia, where the redistricting caused two current U.S. representatives to run against each other for the new district, like the primary. One of them was Alex Mooney, who was endorsed by Trump. And then the other candidate was David McKinley, who was one of the 13 people who voted for Build Back Better.
yeah, and I think that example of how Trump's influence is probably greatest in the Midwest region, because West Virginia is just another state which voted for Trump by an extreme amount. I think by like 30 points in 2020.
Yeah, and Alex Mooney was a pretty hard right candidate too. So, but in West Virginia, it was kind of expected, but it still shows that Trump still has influence over the party. Another race to watch was a Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton. He's been accused of some corruption things like in the state. Like I'm pretty sure he's been involved in like some court procedures and proceedings, but he's also known for filing that post-election like case to the Supreme Court that was signed by a lot of other Republicans that argued that the election results should be overturned. He won his primary against George P. Bush. If you want to talk more about that.
Yeah, the Bush dynasty is like incredibly influential in Texas. George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, they both served in like leadership positions in Texas. And the fact that George W. Bush lost shows that Trump has pretty much taken over the GOP, and it's really Trump's party now, not Bush's party.
I agree with that, and just generally, in like all the primaries, all the elections. Just generally like how the base of the party, like what their opinions are, it's definitely not the party of Bush anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another interesting fact that we can note from all these primaries is that none of these candidates lost by an insane amount. I mean, other than maybe David Perdue in Georgia, but all the Trump-endorsed candidates got at least 30% of the vote, and this shows that at least like 30-35% of the Trump base is validly loyal to Donald Trump.
My personal opinion on that Georgia race is that maybe because Ryan Kemp was pretty close to Trump before the election stuff. So like even in 2018 when he was running against Stacey Abrams, I think the Republican Party did a pretty good job of like making sure that he represented the Trump like wing of the party, just like that he was a America First candidate as they call him. So it was like hard to suddenly change how people viewed him. And also David Perdue. He's been like involved in some like stock like trading scandals in Congress. He's probably seen as more of a corporate like kind of candidate, even though Trump endorsed him, just because he didn't like reject his election claims. So I think like even though Trump is pretty popular in the party, they do not base everything on a Trump endorsement. They kind of analyze the history of the voters. Kind of analyze the history of each candidate too.
That's true. And another thing about David Perdue is I read that his campaign was extremely like lazy, and like in the last few weeks of the campaign, he didn't even run like TV ads at all. Like he was very underfunded.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah, in the North Carolina Senate race, the former governor was beat by Ted Budd, I think.
Yeah, Ted Budd.
Who was endorsed by Trump. That's another like evidence of Trump's influence in the party. And we also had Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the former Speaker of the White House under Donald Trump, winning the Arkansas governor primary. And then we also had in the Alabama race, we also had some interesting results. We had Katie Brilt, I think. Is that the name?
Yeah, Katie Britt.
Yeah, from Alabama. She was endorsed by a lot of business and corporate groups, and won despite not having the Trump endorsement. But that race in general did not have any Trump endorsement because Mo Brooks lost his Trump endorsement after saying we should move on about election stuff. So
Trump originally supported Brooks and even held a rally for him in Alabama, and then he started harshly criticizing Brooks. So it's hard to tell how much Trump's influence played there.
Yeah, he has an interesting character. He's kind of unpredictable, and you can't really tell what's gonna happen with him. Mo Brooks was definitely one of the most Trump-friendly candidates and America First kind of candidates. In general, in this whole election cycle, and the fact that he didn't have a Trump endorsement was really interesting.
We should also touch on the Pennsylvania races.
Okay, let's talk about a government race first. That was probably the most popular primary, in news coverage. We had Mehmet Oz, the former TV doctor, who I know personally from a Turkish Airlines ad. He ran against the other candidate, if you want to talk about it.
Yeah, that was the Senate race actually, but yeah.
Yeah, my bad.
Yeah, that was Mehmet Oz, Dr. Oz, against David McCormick. And McCormick was much more of a Bush-Romney type Republican. He was supported by people like Ted Cruz. And Oz was supported by Trump in the America First wing. But it was an extremely close election, and Oz will probably win. It's in a recount right now. It's likely that Oz will win, but regardless, it was so close that I think it's within 1,000 votes in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it was 0.1% of the vote. It was really close. And yeah, do you want to also talk about a governor race in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, sure. So the governor's race in Pennsylvania saw a decisive victory for Doug Mastriano, I think. And he's a very right-wing guy, and he's extremely into this election denial stuff. He's I think he was even there January 6th. I don't think he went into the Capitol, but he was there at Trump's rally there. And yeah, but he was able to win even despite these stuff with almost 50% of the vote in Pennsylvania. So it just shows that Trump is still extremely influential.
And who won the Democratic primary there? Was it Fetterman, the former lieutenant governor, or not?
Yeah, Fetterman won in the Senate race primary, and then the Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, I think he won in the governor's race.
Oh yeah, Josh Shapiro. Yeah, I think I've been mixing that race up too much. Yeah.
Races to watch for November for sure, because they're both going to be very close.
Yeah, and then other primaries to watch are probably in Arizona, where Doug Ducey was the governor there, and now I don't think he's running, but his wing of the party is running against the Arizona GOP's pretty much dominated by the Trump wing of the party. So it's interesting to see who wins there. It is a state that's been won by Democrats recently, since 2018. So
yeah, and Nevada has an interesting primary between Trump's endorsed candidate Adam Laxalt, who is also supported by the establishment, against a more outsider candidate.
Yeah, and other races to talk about, one would be Mark DeWine in Ohio. He was the pro-lockdown Republican governor of Ohio. He only got 48% of the vote in the primary, which is not the majority, but the other candidates split the vote, so he won it. But it's still definitely not a good show for him.
Yeah. A good question to ask right now is will these Trump endorsed candidates, will Trump's effect be positive or negative for the GOP in the general election?
Yeah, and actually one last thing to talk about before we go into the more general discussion, I think would be the Idaho governor race between Brad Little and who else was running there?
McGeachin.
Yeah, The other candidate was pretty extreme. Brad Little was a pro-lockdown candidate, and the Trump endorsed like more extreme candidate lost the election. So in like those like in those like states in the northwest of the U.S., like Idaho, Montana, like all the states,
Yeah.
I think the influence of Trump isn't as much as like in the Midwest, like Ohio kind of place.
Yeah. I think the exception to that would be Wyoming, because Liz Cheney, who is very anti-Trump, is like widely expected to lose there by a lot.
Yeah, she's been an interesting figure in the national politics since last year, for sure. And yeah, one.
Yeah, you go
Yeah.
on.
So I was just gonna talk about how Trump also like called out irregularities and stuff in the Pennsylvania governor race between the two Republicans. I think this kind of shows how probably in the future he's gonna continue with the election fraud stuff, like in any other race that like his candidate is gonna lose. He's probably gonna claim the same thing.
Yeah, it's getting to kind of like a,
especially if there's mail-in ballots. But I think even if mail-in ballots are gonna be like reduced, he'll find a way to like find some like irregularity, as he calls it, in the elections to call out. I think like it'll be interesting to watch if he runs in 2024, and if he's gonna like, or if he or his like supported candidates are gonna use this tactic anymore.
Yeah, honestly, it's getting to a point where like Trump is contesting literally any election where his candidate or him does not win. Like I saw that he posted that even the Georgia election, which he lost by 50 points, like he's saying it was because of fraud.
Yeah, that's just. I think he's gonna lose more influence if he continues doing this in the party.
Yeah, it's very like destructive towards his like suburban women, suburban men.
I would actually argue that the Georgia Senate races in 2020 could have been more close, if not won by Republicans, for the Senate races, if he didn't have his fraud claims. Because I think it kind of discouraged some of his own voters because they didn't trust the election.
That's very true. Yeah, it has a doubly negative effect for him because it discourages independent voters who maybe don't like the corrosion of democracy, and it discourages his own voters too, as they likely feel their votes don't matter.
Yeah, like in the presidential election, it was pretty close mostly. It was like a 0.5, 0.7 kind of percent. But in the Senate races, it was like 2.5% for like Raphael Warnock. So
yeah, and like if you flip each state by 1%, like Trump would have won the election. Incredibly close.
Yeah, so now we could talk about the more like general direction of the party, just generally like for the 2024 and 2022 elections.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we could talk about Ron DeSantis, Mike Pence, Trump, any influence there, and we could also talk about how Republicans are most likely gonna flip the House, as the party that holds the House is usually gonna lose it in the midterm elections, and now this time it's like really, really close, so they're definitely losing it. And even the Senate, they're likely to lose it, so we could talk about that.
Yeah, I think that these primaries show that if Trump runs in 2024, almost certainly win the nomination. Like, there's hardly anyone in the party who stands a chance. Like, even DeSantis could maybe get like 40 or like 30% of the vote, but like Trump would still win.
Yeah, I think he would not run if Trump was going to run, because he has a future. Like, this is going to be his last election if he decides to run. But DeSantis has a future in the party. He's pretty popular with conservatives. In all polls that Trump's not included, he wins by a large percentage, even against like former Vice President Mike Pence, even against Donald Trump's children, like Trump Jr. In all those races, like the GOP convention in Florida, he was probably like the most popular person there, other than Trump.
Yeah, I would argue that he bites all the baggage that Trump has. He would still probably defeat Biden if the election was at least held today for 2024.
That's an interesting claim. It would be interesting if we had a way to actually know that. I think there's been polls on this, and it's actually pretty close. I think I saw a poll like a couple days ago where it said if Trump and Biden ran today, what would the election be? And it was 45 to 45% with 10% undecided. So that 10% undecided would like probably go for Trump.
See,
if I'm being honest.
Here's the problem for Biden though. Like he doesn't have to win by like 1 point. He really needs at least like 3 or 4 points. Like
yeah.
Anything lower than that, Trump would probably win the Electoral College, even if he loses the popular vote.
Yeah, because these polls, like every time, for some reason, Trump in most states, not in all, but in most states, he outperforms the polls, and the undecided vote usually goes to Trump. Some people call it like the Trump shyness phenomenon thing. Yeah. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's usually been the result. Like the undecided vote usually goes to Trump by like a 2-to-1 factor mostly. So these numbers are kind of bad for Biden. I mean, he is having a tough presidency with like foreign challenges, economic challenges, everything like that. And these factors are going to definitely play into the midterms too. Roe v. Wade, the shootings, like so the gun violence in general, immigration, foreign policy, like Ukraine stuff. And definitely the most important one's going to be the economy with like inflation, gas prices, stuff like that.
Yeah. And as you said on the Senate, I think that like Republicans are very likely to win it because if they can flip Georgia and they maintain Pennsylvania, it's literally all they need. Like
yeah, they need one like they only need to flip one state.
Yeah. I read something interesting that like if they can get to 54 seats this election, right? Then next election, it's going to favor the GOP because a bunch of Democratic incumbents in Republican states are up for re-election. And at that point, they have a serious chance of getting 60 seats, which is a filibuster proof.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see the Supreme Court makeup after that. It could be like 7-2.
You could really be having like a conservative comeback in this country.
Yeah, also, I think some like interesting Senate races to watch right now would be the J.D. Vance versus Tim Ryan race, and also the Pennsylvania race, if Oz wins, which he's likely to, against Fetterman. So those are some interesting races to watch. I think those aren't those like both seats that Republicans had who are retiring right now. I think it's Pat Toomey and Rob Portman.
Yeah, I think that Ohio they're like most likely going to win, but Pennsylvania could be very close.
Pennsylvania's going to be a toss-up. Like, I think Mehmet Oz is gonna have like some is gonna be like not as susceptible to like your extreme right candidate kind of like attacks because he has had some like liberal values before. And he's like a TV personality. He's like seen as mainstream.
Oz is a great candidate because he has support both from like suburban women and even like city people, and he also has the rural base from Trump's endorsement. But I think that he could be dragged down by Doug Mastriano on the ticket.
Oh yeah, that's true.
All right, do you want to say any closing remarks on like the future of the GOP?
I think in the near future, the GOP will still be dominated by Donald Trump. Even though usually when a president is a one-term president, the party shifts, like as it did with George H.W. Bush. But right now, he's still has the most influence over the party. In the next 10 years at least, his wing of the party is going to be the deciding factor, in my opinion. And these primaries, even though he's had some setbacks, I think in general he's still done well for a one-term president. Like, yeah, that's usually not how it happens. Like with H.W. Bush, the whole party shifted with like the new cringe people coming in. But yeah. Do you have any closing remarks?
Yeah, I fully agree with everything you said. I'd also like to add that what we saw in Georgia shows that for Trump voters, even if they may support Trump, they take other factors into account and they don't blindly vote for Trump-endorsed candidates. So clearly, Trump, even though he is the most powerful voice, most influential voice in the GOP, he does have limits to his power.
Yeah. And lastly, we just want to tell our audience that we'll be making new episodes soon about China, about science stuff, about economics, about history. So please tune in. Please listen to us again. We'll be having some really interesting episodes soon, and yeah, just like look out for that.
Yeah, thanks for listening, and see you next episode.